reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mulholland, please call the roll.
Commissioner Arnold?
Here.
Commissioner Collins?
Here.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Present.
Commissioner Slack?
Here.
Secretary Gore?
Present.
Vice President Moore? President O'Connor?
Here. Thank you, Mr. Mulholland. We'll now adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. The agenda was reviewed on Tuesday and reflects all necessary modifications or additions. Reviewing the modified agenda, are there any requested changes to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. We do not have any special recognitions this evening, so we'll now proceed to section 3, opening comments. Does any commissioner wish to offer opening comments? Hearing none, we'll proceed to public comment section. We will now receive public comment from those individuals who are signed up to offer comments to the board this evening. I will remind our speakers that you're allowed 3 minutes to offer your comments to the board. A timer will start when you begin, and I ask you to briefly conclude your remarks when you hear the timer go off. Comments should be directed to the board collectively, should not be abusive or disruptive, and should not address a topic that might be of a confidential nature or that will compromise the impartiality of the board. I will also remind our speakers that while the board is happy to receive your comments, we will not respond or answer questions at this time. If you sign up to speak on a particular topic on tonight's agenda, you will be called to speak when that item is before the board. Please come to the podium and begin your comments when your name is called. Mr. Harris.
Our first speaker this evening is Marilyn Lopez, followed by Carla Prayers.
Good evening, Superintendent Johnson and members of the IPS Board. My name is McKinneyVento Lopez, and I'm a member of the Latino Advisory Committee for the Mayor of Indianapolis. I also host a link of resources and information on social media called La Guia Indy. When I was a child, lyrics to my favorite song was, "Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight." Last time I was here, I spoke and I mentioned the difference between diversity and inclusion. An example of diversity is being invited to attend a dance, but inclusion is being asked to dance. I was exposed to diversity and inclusion at an early age. I learned how those lyrics were so true, that it doesn't matter the color, but our experience as children prepare us to contribute to our children's and community's future. Yet resources, care, hope, and guidance during trauma is scarce for a large percentage of the grand diversity of the children at IPS. As the new superintendent, Alicia Johnson, I agree with her statement about racial equities. If we deal with all racial inequities, we will see improvement. As policies change and new struggles arise, IPS needs a superintendent who's already aware of the current circumstance. I think she's awesome because of your early experience being the current interim superintendent for IPS and now the official superintendent for IPS, and also because you're the first female African-American superintendent. With understanding and experience, Johnson, I believe that you will guide the district into a great future of improvements because you represent two different minority categories, race and gender. My encouragement and expectations are that Johnson will break down the inequities as she begins to invite each school to dance with her in solving issues that the barriers for the children need to receive a great education. Each child has a special story that's being written in our IPS district. Every day they attend a dance that's called school. Every day leaders of the children are needed to engage these children and teach them that no matter if they're red or yellow, black and white, they can dance their way into a successful education. Walking with my children and holding their hand brings me great joy. But when I take my child's hand on a walk and spin them around, their expression always changes to the most beautiful, joyous smile. They look at me and say, "I love you." Alicia Johnson, you have the honors to dance with the future of the children of IPS students. As you hold their hands and spin them into an amazing education, watch them grow up to say, "I loved my IPS school." Congratulations and blessings to you, Alicia Johnson. Let the dance begin.
I'm a little bit short. Good evening, Superintendent Johnson and members of the board. My name is Carla Prayers, and I am an IPS parent. I have two kids and a soon-to-be fourth grader at Global Prep Academy and another son who will be attending high school after the summer. I spoke to the board last month. At the time, I had been reading about Alicia online, and I talked to you about my support to her. I am glad to see she will be soon be leading our district. Alicia is the best person for the job because her kids got her IPS scores. She is not treating her kids differently than mine. She is the most qualified to lead and improve IPS. She knows the system and what needs to be done to improve our most struggling scores. I believe this starts at home. I think a lot of the kids we need to help the most really need parent involvement. I think Alicia, because her kids attend IPS and because I have already witnessed this, will be more involved and engaged with our community. She could have her kids in private school, but she chose to have them at IPS just like my sons. She's local and she knows our system. Because she has been our interim leader, I think she has had time to listen to parents and come up with new ideas on how to improve our scores. I think she is invested in making a better IPS for all of us. I want to make sure that the next leader of our district is someone who provides opportunities for our kids, ensures all kids have access to good school. I think Alicia Johnson will fight for kids of our background, kids like mine. Thank you for selecting her to continue to lead IPS.
Shawanda Tyson, followed by John Cooper. Lamika Perkins.
I got 1 second. Since 2011, I have started every speech in this room with one word, 3. I love IPS. I have celebrated 12 beginning of the school years and 1 on the 6th floor. I have received the best training that one can receive from a district. Everyone in the city knows IPS trains the best teachers who turn into good leaders. I have been offered leadership opportunities that legislation has modeled. And like all good things, it all has to come to an end. As I was preparing for the fight that we all know I've been making, I got my tax paperwork in for my house. I voted yes for IPS, and I will never regret that because the children and the teachers deserve that. But when my taxes are 4 times the raise that I received this year, I had a lot of decisions to make. In 2011, I co-authored an op-ed called The Cost of Loyalty. I prided myself on staying through the freeze. I prided myself on working Saturday school, homebound, and summer school to stay afloat. After those 5 years, I said to myself, I would never put my kids' financial stability up for no one. I stayed through a union scandal and continued. I was left with 3 options: go back on my morals, continue the fight like I always do, with a strong face for the teachers, quit the work that I started, because we are still here. You look at that crowd and see who's in black. Or say farewell to the place that I have loved so much. Today I say farewell. And I'm not going to say goodbye, because that's when you never walk through a door. And as I leave, I give you one ask. And all the money that leadership team put out to fight that union, we found out we only needed to talk to one group, and that was you. We asked that you audit their membership, and if they do not have 50 plus 1%, you recognize that group who is still behind me, and you do something like you always have done. You be innovative, and you change what unions look like in this city. You look at 2 unions. Give teachers the right to bargain 2 contracts. You give teachers the autonomy you have given to kids, the autonomy you give to principals in their workbook. You have the right to do that. You have a great day.
Shawanda Tyson.
Good evening, Superintendent Alicia Johnson and members of the board. My name is Shawanda Tyson, and I am the mother of 2 children, one who attends Ignite Achievement Academy. I am also a product of IPS and care deeply about the future of this district. I am here tonight to thank the board for choosing Alicia Johnson for the full-time role of superintendent. I had the pleasure of getting to know Alicia after she demonstrated the courage and leadership to bring a new model to my son's struggling school. I first met her back when Ignite was introduced to us parents. When she got up and started talking, I immediately felt like I could talk to her, and when I did, I felt heard. We had a great conversation. She told me she also has kids in IPS, that she was previously a teacher, and she reassured me that this model would meet the needs of my son and kids like my son. Since then, I've bumped into her many times. Each time we've had conversations as genuine as the first. She came to me after the first year of Ignite to ask how things were going. She remembered me and truly cared about my son and his classmates and how they were doing in their first year in a new school. Getting to know her, it's clear she wants to see results for all children. She knows Indianapolis. She not only knows urban districts, but she knows our district. I have faith that she, better than anyone, can get results for the kids. Alicia is always open and honest with families and treats us like equals. When I ask her questions, she doesn't answer like an administrator talking to a parent, but a parent talking to another parent. She's a problem solver. When families come to her with their trouble, she's not only listening, she makes a plan to deliver a solution. I know she's the right person for our district because she is not your average superintendent. She is approachable, knowledgeable, and she is the leader of our children in need. Even though some people are against innovation, I believe her vision is so bright and completely directed at helping all kids succeed. If it were not for Alicia's leadership in IPS as the innovation officer, I don't believe my son, Morel, would be getting the support and quality education he's getting at Ignite. Morel has an IEP, and I was told years ago that he would likely never academically perform on grade level. Thanks to the Ignite team, Morel has excelled beyond my wildest dreams. I thank you for thinking of Indianapolis families and choosing Alicia Johnson as our next superintendent. She's proven she's ready for the job, and that proof to me comes from the success of my son is having today in IPS. Thank you so much.
John Cooper. Carrie Patterson.
Good evening, Superintendent Johnson, members of the board. Happy to be back. I am coming back to ask again for a couple things. The first thing is the principals had a 2-day summit this week where I'm sure they were able to gain a lot of knowledge, plan ahead for the future of this year. But I wonder if those principals were trained explicitly in what to do when a staff member is injured at school. Do they have a written policy? Is there a tree of who to go to, whether that's a social worker or the nurse or an assistant principal, should the principal not be in the building? The same way we have to post OSHA incidents, I believe this document should be created and be posted publicly for teachers and other staff members to see so they understand their responsibilities and rights in the same way that the code of conduct exists, where you can see how I can be responsible, be respectful, and safe, because staff members want to feel safe at school. The other ask I will continue to have is that we truly and deeply inspect the benefits and health care that is available to teachers. If you look at the 3 columns, plans 1, 2, and 3, you can compare and contrast what is available to us with my clinic going away, my clinic, where we had different locations we could go to. Members of staff who had diabetes could go there, get their checkup, and get free testing strips. Now they're having to go to their pharmacy or local doctor and paying, upwards of $195 for a month's supply of those strips. Our healthcare costs are unsustainable for a adult and their child and or children. We're being asked to set aside up to $23,000 if we hit all of our premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket expenses. I don't have an extra $23,000, and I don't think very many of us do. Thank you so much for your time.
President O'Connor, that concludes public comment for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Now moving to the consent agenda. The items included on the consent agenda were reviewed at our agenda review session on Tuesday and reflect any and all necessary modifications. Are there questions or requests to remove an item from the consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. There are no board reports this evening, so I'll now turn the agenda over to Superintendent Johnson.
Thank you, President O'Connor. There are 4 superintendent reports to be presented this evening, items 6.01, 6.02, 6.03, and 6.04. The first item, item 6.01, is an update on the services we provide to students who are homeless and in foster care, and this was at the request of commissioners to receive this update. So Brent Freeman, our United Student Supports Officer, along with Sherry Gibson, is here to present this presentation to you all this evening. Welcome.
Thank you, and thank you, Superintendent Johnson and commissioners, for this opportunity to give an update on the homeless and foster care services in IPS. During the presentation this evening, we'll share a bit about definitions, some related data, updates from ESSA, services provided, and a little bit of what to expect this school year and beyond. And so I'll hand it over to Sherry Gibson to say more.
Thank you, Brent, for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation, Board of Commissioners. So as Brent stated, we're going to get started with definitions. The definition of a homeless child and youth is a child or youth that lacks a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. An unaccompanied student is a student that is homeless, yet living somewhere without their parent or guardian. Foster care are foster students that are in a 24-hour care, substitute care of the Child Welfare Agency. In 2018-19, IPS identified 1,098 students as homeless. In the 2017-18 school year, IPS identified 1,127 students as homeless. Also, in the 2017-18 school year, Indiana identified 18,786 students as homeless. Indianapolis Public Schools homeless students accounted for 6% of that number. In the Every Student Succeed Acts, the main update is that we are now having a wonderful collaboration. We have to collaborate with DCS in order for us to ensure that the students are receiving the educational services. Also, each child is to remain at their school of origin unless DCS and I determine that it is not in the child's best interest to attend that school. IPS is responsible for providing transportation and other services for our homeless students. Last school year, we had a student in one of our high schools that we identified as homeless during the winter months. When we found out about this student was riding a bike from Warren Township to one of our high schools in the snow. Once we identified the student as homeless, we provided the student with transportation, uniforms, school supplies, and food for her to take home for her and her family. Right now with foster care, we are just trying to ensure that we provide educational needs for our foster students. That is the main goal for our foster students at this time. What's new in 2019 and beyond? So we are, this upcoming school year, we're able to provide district-wide training for McKinneyVento to all of our staff. Our McKinneyVento Council is developed at this time, and that is to assist with planning for McKinneyVento students. The 2019-22 grant introduces major revision. However, the grant now states that we have to collaborate with local school districts, and we will also collaborate with our innovative charter schools. We are also collaborating with Stopover Inc., which is our Indianapolis homeless youth shelter. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Arnold.
The McKinney-Vento Advisory Council, is that just IPS? Is that sponsored by IPS? And what kind of individuals serve on that?
The McKinney-Vento Advisory Council will be IPS employees, and the majority of the people, all of the people on that council will be social workers.
Okay, so they're IPS social workers?
Yes, ma'am.
That deal with this specific
They deal with
population?
Yes, ma'am. They're our main identifiers at our schools.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Gore.
Thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate your update. I was quite impressed at one of the meetings that I attended as to the service that you provided to our students, not only at the school, but making sure that they got there and following that student during the time, even though they are homeless. And so I wanted everyone to have a general idea of what IPS does and the good work that you do, as well as you for our students. And thank you again.
Thank you
for your work.
Hawkins.
Thank you again for the report. You mentioned social workers and folks that have, I guess my question really is for folks that have the most, I would say, steady or direct contact with students in foster care situations or homeless situations. Are there supports, or are there, or do folks have access to supports or even employee assistance opportunities? Because I can imagine that some of the interactions are challenging and very difficult, and it's challenging work. And so do we have any embedded sort of systems in place where we wrap around and support those of our team that are directly engaged with students who are in the challenging situations of homelessness and foster care, to support them in the work as well?
That I don't have the answer to right now,
Okay.
but I can get that answer to you.
And I can speak just to, I mean, we do have an EAP that all staff are able to access that are on benefits. And then we've piloted and we're working with the foundation to add pilot schools to a teacher wellness. And it deals with secondary trauma, but we know that's an under addressed issue is the secondary trauma of dealing with like students who are in intense circumstances. So it's a thoughtful question.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's important that we continue to seek ways to wrap around and support those that are supporting our kids. So appreciate that.
Commissioner Slack.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys for coming and all you guys working and putting this together. What are our outreach services? Do you have any names of any of our outreach services that actually provide care for our foster care?
For foster care,
Mhm.
we use, well, I will say we do provide mental health services for our students in foster care. That would be probably the only one, yes, ma'am.
And then, what is the average attendance rate for our foster care students coming in and out of the system?
That's an answer I would have to get back to you on, yes, ma'am.
And then the tutoring service, is that provided in care, like
Yeah.
in the house?
Yes, it's provided in IPS schools. So through our McKinneyVento grant, we set aside funds to provide after-school tutoring for our homeless students who have high attendance issues or low I-STEP scores.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Sheree and Brent. I appreciate all the conversations we've had as online, but I'm wondering, how did the change with the legislative change with McKinneyVento on the homeless policy, student policy, how did that affect us?
You mean the McKinney-Vento law?
Yes, I saw that there was some change in the language,
Yes, ma'am.
and so I just wondered, how did that affect our particular policy? Because I always have thought that we were very on top of things.
Yeah, so there were really no changes to McKinney-Vento. The changes, the ESSA updates were made to foster care. So awaiting foster care placement was removed from the McKinney-Vento law and made into its own act, the Foster Care Act. So that's the difference.
Okay, so does that mean that there are other levels of documentation or something that the kids in foster care must, or their guardians or DCS must provide?
Yes, ma'am. Normally for foster students in the past, the law stated that all we needed was a placement letter from DCS to state that they were in the foster parents' care to enroll. However, with the ESSA updates, now we must have when a student enters our district, transfers schools within IPS or outside of IPS, DCS and myself must sign what's called a point of contact checklist. And that ensures the best determination for the child, whether the child will remain in their school of origin or whether the child would attend the boundary school for the foster parent's address.
That's exactly what I need to know. Thank you
ma'am.
very
You're
much.
welcome.
Commissioner Arnold.
Knowing with specifically the homeless population, that they're very transient and hard to keep track of, can you share what the strategy, I mean, I think it would be very, very difficult to keep track because they move or they're in, I know the co-living, they're living with an aunt one week and in the car the next week or whatever. How do we proactively continue to engage with these? If a child disappears out of a school, do we initiate going to look for those students, or do we wait until they come and say, I'm now homeless and I'm living here, but I'd like my child? Talk to me a little bit about what that strategy is to keep this population engaged.
So the main piece of that strategy would be the safe schools training. The law now, McKinney-Vento law now states that all staff must be trained in McKinney-Vento. So that is one of the strategies that we're working on, is to train all staff. In training all staff, that ensures that each staff member is aware of how to identify a homeless student. As I mentioned before, social workers are the main identifiers at the school level. However, if the custodian and the food service worker and our PIs are aware of how to identify a homeless student, it helps us. When a child goes missing and we know that they're homeless, For our schools, the first red flag for homelessness is attendance. So once those children miss a couple of days of school, or the first day of school, actually our social workers are on their job to find out where those children went. That is how many of our homeless children are identified, is by them actually missing school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one quick question on sort of process, particularly with the homeless, but this may stand with foster children too. I see we are assisting them, sort of eliminating the barriers. When we get to immunization or dental care or other health care, how do we coordinate that activity?
So right now, I coordinate with health services, the Marion County Health Department. Of course, we have our own audiology department. We have Dr. Fisher's for eyeglasses. He'll put corrective eyewear on any of our kids, insured or not. And we just use the resources available in the community, and we try to have a good, positive relationship with them to ensure that those services are given to our children at low or no cost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one more.
Sure.
Specifically with the foster care, do you work with some of the recognized foster care agencies? I'm thinking like Children's Bureau or Villages. Can you talk about what partnerships you have with other agencies that serve a similar population?
Yes, I work with all of our foster care agencies in Indianapolis, Child Advocates, and the Villages. So what that looks like is they're like right under DCS. So mainly the contact that I have with them is when I get the placement letter from them to state that they've placed a child in one of their foster parents' care. When we collaborate together to ensure that the child has the services that we are responsible for providing, that Indianapolis Public Schools is responsible for providing.
So those organizations can provide case management and other wraparound services.
Yes, ma'am.
That we work with them to make sure that they're engaged and incorporated into the education
Yes, ma'am.
environment.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Gore?
And when we get back to transportation, I did understand, and looking at the barriers, when the children are even in motels and special, we still try to get, or we do get transportation to ensure that they get to school. Some of it bus and some of it private, or
So transportation now in IPS, of course, we're using our school buses. For our high school students with McKinneyVento, if they're placed out of district and are on an Indigo bus line, we provide bus passes through McKinneyVento for those students. Also, last school year, we've begun a collaboration with ALC Solutions, which is a contracted car service, who's been picking up our children in lovely brand new SUVs and giving them those luxury rides to school every day.
very good.
Commissioner Slack?
Sorry, one more question.
No problem.
I'm seeing clothing here as far as one of the barriers that's necessary to provide. How do we get these funding for these the clothing, the uniforms, and items that our kids need?
The McKinneyVento grant, one of the things that we are able to use that funding for is school uniforms. So I actually have uniforms here on hand in the Ed Center, so when parents come visit, I can give the uniforms to them. Book bags, school supplies are donations, but our clothing, we buy through the McKinneyVento grant.
And this is told to the foster parents too, because I usually hear that that's one of the I guess one of the complaints.
Yes,
is that
ma'am.
they do not get enough support from the foster care itself, but we are giving support here to the foster parents.
Well, no. McKinneyVento law is separate from the Foster Care Act. So it is specific that these clothing or the funds used can only be used towards homeless children or children at risk of homelessness. So with foster care, DCS is responsible for almost the total care of the child. So they give vouchers for school uniforms. Therefore, unless I have donated clothing, school uniforms, I will give foster children our donated uniforms. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that
You're welcome.
clarification.
Thank you both. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Moving on to our second item, item 6.02 is an update on our partnership with Indigo and an expansion of that pilot program across our 4 district-managed IPS high schools going into the 1920 school year. So Dennis Tackett, our Chief of Transformation, will provide that update this evening.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson and IPS commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to share something that we view to be very positive. a wonderful opportunity that we are presenting as an option, and we refer to it as the Indigo Pilot Project Update. And I would first like to acknowledge my collaborative partner representing Indigo, Brian Llewellyn, who is the Vice President of Public Affairs and Communications. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. And he'll, if I need a lifeline to answer questions, he's the guy. We'll give you a quick overview of the pilot. We'll share with you student writer experience as we presented it in readable material. We're going to share with you our onboarding plan, talk about the ownership of the work ahead, and then the financial implications. So isn't that small print? The project objective is to reduce our per pupil spending on transportation, to reinvest more resources into the teacher and principal salaries. Piloting as a busing option, again, it's an option as opposed to reducing yellow bus services this year. We believe will provide, can lead to significant savings, and then increasing access to public transportation. So who will it serve? It will serve all students grades 9 through 12 in our high schools, and the duration of the pilot is meant to be 2 years, the 1920 and the 2021 school year. With regard to choice, again, this is an option. We are not reducing yellow bus service, and so it will be an option for, or choice for our students to ride either Indigo or to continue with the standard yellow bus service. The ease of access should come in the following manner. It should be that we're receiving card stock, chipped card stock from Indigo that we will then print as student ID badges so that one card will function as both. There will be a full year access, and it will be available 24/7 starting in August of 19 through July of 20. I want to pause for a moment and compare and contrast that to other cities and other schools that have chosen to limit those ID passes where they're available from 6 in the morning to 8 at night and only Monday through Friday. We want to give our students a much richer opportunity to experience public transportation and to perhaps lift some boundaries for them with regard to weekend work, with regard to extracurricular, that sort of thing. So our passes will be available 24/7 for the period of time, August 19 through July of 20. We will take a careful look at those differently abled students and provide them the appropriate options. So the time and ease of ridership, we don't know that. What we know is that with the advent, not for all of our schools and all of our communities, what we know is that with the initiation, the inauguration of the Red Line, that Short Ridge will be well served, Tech will be well served. We remain uncertain about the pickup transfer frequency for the northwest and northeast sides. We know that Washington will be served with future build out of the additional lines pushed out, I believe, until 2023. And then the service to addicts with regard to the frequency and the closeness of the stop remain as they currently exist right now. We continue to work and remain in conversation with Indigo about perhaps enhancing those options for addicts as we continue the pilot process. So what we've completed so far. We've completed the Indigo pilot ride, which was produced in fairly amazing short order with a huge degree of outstanding quality by Christian Strickland and her team in OCE. I was challenged by using acronyms in the past, so I'll let you know that OCE stands for the Office of Communication Engagement. I wrote it down. So thank you, Christian. Thank you to Ashley. Thank you to Carrie. Thank you to Shelby. Thank you to Kenny and others that I failed to name. Thank you for that tremendous job. We've also produced our own video, which is pretty awesome in its own right. So I can't wait to preview those for you. We're conducting back-to-school nights. We're conducting on-site training that will be available on Saturdays, one Saturday per month. We think that as ridership becomes a neat, interesting, dare I say, cool thing, that as we develop a core leadership through student riders, that their peers will think, wow, I want to do that too. We anticipate that there may be some hesitation on the part of parents regarding a change in ridership philosophy, but as their kids are saying, Mom, Dad, I want to ride, we want to provide ongoing opportunities throughout the year for them to be trained. And we also want to provide a similar opportunity for not only the students, but for the parents to be trained as well. I would say at the time that we completed this slide deck, we had not had a security meeting. Well, we had a massive one yesterday. It included, we ran out of space in our room and needed a bigger room, but it was a pretty neat, very collaborative, well-engaged set of communication involving Indigo Security, involving IMPD, involving the Sheriff's Department, involving IPS Police Department, involving our principals and principal representatives. So there were lots of questions flying about because security is something that we have taken very seriously. We spent a lot of time. We had done a frequently asked questions in advance of yesterday's meeting. It seemed to work well. It gave us a framework for discussion that allowed discussion to flow before we got off into the weeds and too many other areas. So we appreciated having the work that had been done and collected by Christian Strickland and her team with the frequently asked questions. So thank you for that second assist. So what we're looking for with this rollout, we're looking for student leaders. We're looking for those leaders who say, I've done this before, or I want to do it. Think of the doors this will open for me. Work study, internship, an opportunity to travel over the weekend, whatever it may be. So we're looking for those student leaders who will say, follow me because we think Indigo is just the way to do this. We're working to train student staff, and I met today with a representative of the Shortridge Parent Teacher Student Association, who very much wants to offer her support and that of her organization to make Indigo Pilot a huge success. And so we will be in touch with other parent, student, teacher organizations as those opportunities arise. We want to build ridership. We want to help our community understand that this is a viable option, not only now, but well into the future. So we have understood that as we attempted pilots a year ago, that we didn't offer necessarily the support, the type, or the full support that we could and should. So we have reconsidered that, and we're coming to you with what we think is a fairly vibrant approach for support of this Indigo project. And again, I have to tip my hat to Ashley, to Carrie, to Christian, because they're the ones who say, we know how to get it done, to which this simple accountant said, thank you so much. And so they have engaged and recommended and engaged in our training our parent involvement educators, PIEs, to be the boots on the ground and to own this ridership process. So we also know that, and I may have shared this with you in the past, that if we issue bus passes, student IDs, bus passes, that 75% of those who receive their passes are going to lose them once, 50% are going to lose and 50% of the 75 who receive the second are going to lose them a second time. So the PIEs will not just have a one and done job. They will be responsible for issuing replacement cards, but moreover, they will be responsible for maintaining the IPS database that will integrate then with student rider database that will integrate with Indigo for ridership tracking so that we can get the accurate data that we need. So we can determine ridership, usership, hours of service, that sort of thing, as well as the ridership over the weekend. So we want to get a set of robust data, and so we appreciate the PIE's willingness to accept this responsibility that will allow us to integrate and share data between IPS and Indigo. So thanks to the Indigo staff, ongoing administrative support, Brian, his team, the Indigo security force, and the IMPD and Sheriff's Departments that they brought with us yesterday. We know that there will continue to be a build out of the data and the analytical system and the development of the ridership metrics, and that will evolve, continue to evolve from where we start September 1 until through our second year. And at each point in the time, at the end of the 9 weeks, at the end of the semester, wherever it may be, we think we'll have more and more valuable data with which to make longer-term decisions. So we're looking at citywide security services, and I spoke about that very briefly, about who we've involved so far, who owns what, where, when, who's responsible, so that we have those bases covered. So to the students, this will be an initial pass that is free to the student. When they lose it, it'll be $10 for the replacement cost. To IPS, you see the first year cost of $75,000. That's $15 per rider per card, based on 5,000 riders. And while we continue to provide the cost of ongoing yellow bus service as it currently exists, and then you'll see our second year cost, and then we'll be working towards an agreement into the longer term future. So just an overview of the school rider plans. With Shortridge affected by the red line, positively affected by the red line, starting roughly September 1st. The pickup will be between every 10 and 15 minutes. With Arsenal Tech, will be at the same, between every 10 and 15 minutes. With George Washington, it will be as it currently exists, and that will be every 15 to 30 minutes. With Crispus Attucks, it will be, right now it's a pickup every 60 minutes, and we'll work to continue to enhance and to improve that metric. And then you'll see the final with KIPP Legacy. It's on bus line 5, so that will remain every 15 to 30 minutes. We should be going to questions. I hate this.
So you're ready for questions, what you're telling us?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for that save. Yes, I am. I'm ready for questions.
Commissioner Gore.
Thank you very much. Sounds like you're really working on this to be something very positive. Working and looking with the security, what does the security service look like, for example, and how long will they be available per day for students?
Security service works like this. The Indigo security will be at the downtown transit center. So they are there as long as the transit center is open. So they will be there and available. And then the way that Indigo conducts its security services is that they use IMPD and or the Marion County Sheriff's Department, depending on the location of the bus within the city. And so the approach will be that when our students ride Indigo, they will be like any other private citizen. And so the security forces to which they will be responsible and to which they will be, Indigo will be responding will be IMPD and or the Marion County Sheriff's Department. So they will be available for every riding hour.
Okay, I understand, but would there be a time when there is a large number of students at one area, even downtown, meaning that our security would be available if that were to occur for the safety and for the children?
This is, thank you for that excellent question. It's an important question, so I'll do my best to give you a direct answer. During yesterday's meeting, following yesterday's meeting, there was a separate or a second meeting between IPS Police Department and the other law enforcement agencies. And what I think took place, what I understood to take place, is that IPS PD has pledged their support during their available hours to come in times of need. If we have, as you described, we have a particular situation that may involve multiple students, but the first jurisdiction for security would be IMPD and the Marion County Sheriff's Department, and then could be supplemented or augmented by IPS PD.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Dennis, and all the work that everyone has put into this. I was very impressed with the handout that you gave us, the little booklet that would be really exciting for independent students. I'm wondering if there's been any conversation about What about a student who cannot or will not pay the $10 for their card, their second card, or their third card? Will IPS then pick them back up? And the other part of that is, what if a student moves to another part of town? Is there some kind of tracking that if they're outside of maybe the busing convenience area, then they would have to be back onto a yellow bus?
That's a great question. Those are great
Two
questions.
questions.
Yes, thank you. So let me answer the second one because it's the one I remember. The card is the card is an Indigo pass, and it will function as an ID. But also, I think part of the responsibility of the PI, the parent involvement educator, will be to keep that database. And so, if the student maintains current information within the student database, then the PI would, I think, make that coordinated effort with our yellow bus service provider through our transportation to make sure that yellow bus service is not only provided, but the changes noted. So the first question?
The first question was, what if a student doesn't want to pay the $10 or can't pay the $10?
Then we have yellow bus service for them.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore?
Again, thank you, and I really do appreciate Indigo and their assistance in working with us. But I continue to say the same thing, which is transportation is one of the biggest cost savings we're supposed to have. So I just need to understand a couple things. The first thing was, what's the amount of dollars we pay right now for high school kids' transportation?
Approximately $12 million.
So we pay approximately $12 million.
For high school. Yes, grades 9 through 12.
And so we're saying in the second year, but I think you meant to say that we're going to have choice, right? For 2 years since it's a pilot, because it said it was going to end at 1920.
Yes, that's correct.
So we're going to have it for 2 years, for 2021.
Yes.
Okay, and so the second year will still be in the pilot. So they answered my question, because I was trying to figure out, we're going from $12 million to $160,000. Is that what we're saying?
That's just, it's a build-up as IPS and Indigo build up the metrics and analytical capability. So it's an increased subscription cost, but the first year is Indigo worked very hard to make sure that this could fit into our budget that has already been cast for the 1920 year. So that's a huge give on the part of Indigo, a huge sign of collaboration and cooperation. And so if I might take it to the future where I think you may be going. So right now, the cost per card per kid is $15 for the year. When we're fully built out, and if we were to move to this, it would be roughly I'm rounding, but roughly $100 per card per kid. So it would be, that math, it's still 5,000, would be $500,000. And so the contrast.
Versus the $12 million that we're paying.
That's
today.
exactly where I was going. That's right. You're better at math than I am.
Okay, that's good. And so, and I want to give Indigo and you guys kudos for the 24/7, because I think, as our kids grow and they need to be able to get around and do different things, and we're very happy that Indigo is doing things to make our community have better transportation options throughout the city.
Absolutely.
And as our kids grow and become more global, they'll realize that, their experience on the Indigo bus will be very beneficial as they try to move around. However, I do have a concern with the Christmas attic piece, because the 60 minutes that we're talking about, that's just the 60 minutes from once they get to bus line number 34. And so I would assume, I'm looking at the Indigo gentleman right now. I can't think of your name, but I know who you are. Okay, so the 60 minutes, is that around one of the new lines that we anticipate is going to be built to the 3 years that's been pushed out? So therefore, the probability of seeing those major savings, even if we wanted to, we will not be seeing them. Would you kind of sort of agree with me on that?
So just to Brian Llewellyn, Vice President of Public
Brian,
Affairs.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. So just a quick correction on the slide. The route that goes on MLK Michigan Road is actually a 30-minute route. So there's a bus every 30 minutes on that route. And one of the things that we anticipate that we'll learn is what is the demand what's the market really for students arriving at each school based on where they live and the destination of the school. One thing that we fully anticipate is going to happen is a conversation about additional service to meet the demands as well as bell time matchups. So that's something that we have experience with. There are obviously additional costs to run extra bus, and so that's something that we anticipate that we'll learn during the pilot period. What might those additional trips look like, and what is the right level of service to supply to each school? We are a public transportation operation, so it won't be a yellow school bus. It won't be a private trip. It'll be a regular public trip that's published on the timetable. But that additional cost to us is something that we'll have to understand what the true demand is to meet the market for each of those schools individually.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Ms. Gore, I think I'm trying to go where Ms. Gore was. So I believe that we have people that ride the bus sometime who look like they're riding the bus, but they're really people there to keep people safe. Is that correct?
So we do use, to the question about security, we use IMPD off-duty officers, and they do random ride checks on the routes.
Okay.
At the transit center, there are armed security guards, unarmed security guards, and law enforcement officers. There are probably 5 of them there at any given time, from the time that we open all the way through really the end of the busy hour. And it's actually staffed 24 hours with security staff.
And I would assume that when we first start out, with the pilot, that we will have some of the unofficial riders on the bus to ensure that our children are safe. For those buses that will take the majority of our children, where the majority of our children are riding, would that be incorrect to assume?
No, it would not be incorrect to assume. One of the conversations we're having is what level of support from the district and the school we may need to respond to the additional influx of students. We have this experience with IndyMet High School on West Michigan, and they actually will periodically send school staff to make a trip between the transit center and the school, just so that there's some presence, there's some recognition of this adult on the bus that the students are familiar with. And those are things that we will absolutely build out a little more robust response to. And so this pilot period is really an opportunity for us to ramp that up and understand what the demands are on each of our organizations individually and the system, the transit system itself.
Okay, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Dennis, Brian, thank you for the presentation. So 1 Indigo question, 2 IPS questions. I'll start with Indigo. Congratulations on the new appointment of the new CEO or executive director of Indigo. That's exciting.
It's very exciting,
Yeah.
yes.
But I also read about a week or 2 before that we were delaying for a year. We, as the community, Indigo specifically, there was a delay on the purple and the blue line of about a year. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So these are massive infrastructure projects, and we had a very aggressive schedule. The property acquisition that's required for adding an additional turn lane here, working with the utilities, so the drainage infrastructure is very, very subpar right now on East 38th Street. There's a lot of areas that just have an open ditch on the side of the road. The road itself doesn't have any drainage. And so as we've gotten further into the design and engineering, we actually, through our coordination with citizens, found out that their system is not going to accept the amount of water that we're trying to move off the roadway. So we have an additional connection to a separated sewer system that is adding time to the design. And so that's the source of the purple line being kicked out. And just overall, the other projects that are going on in the city, the closure of 65 and 70 when they rebuild the inner loop downtown, that is going to significantly impact traffic. And through coordination with the city and NDOT, we did not want to have Washington Street under construction for the blue line and Meridian and 38th Street under construction for the purple line. So we have resequenced out the implementation of the Marion County Transit Plan as far as those 2 rapid transit projects, but they are still on the docket, and they will be happening in the next few years.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. I know last time we met, I detected a sense of confidence that red, blue, and purple would be ready to go. And so I'm hopeful that this new information that's out there, which I understand infrastructure is tricky with all that CEG is doing and the upgrades to infrastructure across the city, but I'm hopeful that we're on that, we maintain this schedule.
Yeah, well, and we're committed to making these projects happen, and we're committed to providing additional service wherever we can. And so there are going to be significant investments in service that are incremental over the years. This is a big ship that we're trying to turn and correct decades of underinvestment. And there's a lot of work to be done all over the city, and we're committed to making those improvements incrementally over the next several years.
Okay, I appreciate that. So my IPS question, first one is, when, I thought I read this somewhere, if you are a high school student, do you opt in to one of the options?
It's available.
So yellow bus versus Indigo, do you opt in and you have, can you?
They're both at your disposal. Your ID card gets you on, serves as an Indigo pass. So you can ride it one day if something happens and you need to ride the yellow bus the next day. So both are available to you at any time.
So the yellow buses are, even if the students are opting into Indigo, the yellow bus is still running the route, making the stops appropriate?
That's correct.
Regardless of, okay.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Second question is the PI is the primary point of contact at the school level?
Yes.
That's correct. So I noticed that which is great, that it provides, opportunity for students that might be involved in extracurriculars that might be after school to ride. So as a parent, who do I contact if it's 6:30 or 5:30? Is there a sort of a 24-hour dispatch that is connected to our transportation team, or does Indigo provide some of that capacity?
We talked about this at length yesterday.
Yeah.
So Indigo provides customer service 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then our dispatch is available after the customer service center closes through we have a connected phone system. We've also identified that there's some collaboration and training that's an opportunity with the IPS transportation phone number and the folks who staff that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
The IPS dispatch is open until 9:30.
I have a few questions. Can you give me some clarification on the Washington High School? I see the others are assigned bus lines, and it just says bus service until construction. I understand the purple line's not. So I live on the east side and I want to go to Washington.
So the Washington has Route 8 bus, and that segment operates every 30 minutes. So there's 15-minute service that extends all the way to White River Boulevard area, Washington, and then at Harding.
I know, I just didn't see it on there and I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
It's a little nebulous for me.
Route 8 is every 30 minutes at that location.
One of the questions that I've heard, or one of the concerns, are people who would like to use the Indigo for high school students, but they don't live in an area that is pedestrian friendly to get to the Indigo bus stop, whereas an yellow bus will come into their neighborhood or come closer to their house. So I know that's probably something that's, I don't know that you could fix it, but I know that's, neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks or kids have to cross really busy thoroughfares to get to the Indigo bus stop. So any thoughts on how to fix that?
And that's a significant legacy problem that isn't going to be fixed in the next 10, 15, probably even 20 years. The way that the city developed, there are significant pieces of infrastructure that were just not built. We see the same thing on our paratransit service. So we operate a service that's curb to curb for individuals with disabilities. And there are folks with a disability who, if they had a good ADA accessible sidewalk from their apartment to a bus stop, then they would ride the regular fixed route. But the reality is we have to send the demand response vehicles to go pick them up because of the lack of infrastructure. So this is a big citywide problem that isn't going to be fixed quickly. The approach that we're working with IPS is we want to be a good partner, and my perspective is that there are still going to be those needs that potentially there are always going to be some kids who aren't located in a place where they can safely walk to a bus route. And so we're really working to mesh the two services together and make sure that we're smart about how IPS is spending their existing transportation dollars and how Indigo can provide capacity so that we're not duplicating each other.
And my last question, do we have a projection on how many students, I don't know how many high school students we have that
5,000.
5,000. So do we have a projection on how many that we think will use Indigo for this coming school year? Are we projecting anything or just throwing it in there?
Dennis says 5,000. I like that number. So the experience that we have at Purdue Polytechnic, where no yellow school bus was provided, about 65% of students are using Indigo 3 times a week or more. The school has opted to use Indigo to go back and forth on field trips, so the total number of individuals who have been on the bus at least once is in the high 90% range. Fully recognize that this is a different set of circumstances and you're still maintaining the yellow school bus, so I don't anticipate that number to be 60-65% in the first year. It's really, that's the beauty of the pilot, right, is that we're both learning together about what to expect. We did map where students live relative to bus service, and I think it was in the high 80s. 80-85% of students are located within a reasonable walk of a bus stop. So we think the market is there, and actually more than half of students were on what we call a one-seat trip. So students that are on a bus line that goes directly to a school. We have not gotten down to the breakdown at the school level data, but this pilot is actually a great opportunity for us to see student behavior by school and see where they're boarding and what hours of the day and days of the week that they're using the service.
And just final note, very much appreciate the brochure, the little book. I thought it was very well done and very informative, so I hope that helps.
Our teams work together, the communication staff at Indigo and the IPS communication staff to develop that, and they took it and ran with it on a pretty short timeline, so they're great to work with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Slack. And
I agree. I really appreciate the brochure. It was awesome. It looks great. I have a couple questions. Did I hear you correctly when you said that we're still running the yellow bus to every stop that the students would be going to?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
What kind of cost savings are we going to still incur if we're still running the yellow bus at every
No
stop?
cost savings this year. We're gathering data.
Okay.
We're trying to
Right,
determine how we can save cost entering into the second year.
Okay, next question is, when we're talking about on slide 3, increasing the student access to public transportation, I'm all in agreement with that. I love the fact that kids get to do extracurricular activities and jobs and internships. My only concern is, like Commissioner Gore said, with security and with liability. Where does IPS's liability end? Does it end when they get downtown, off the bus? Does it end when they actually get on the bus? If a student gets hurt on that bus, is IPS still liable? I guess that's where I'm kind of stuck at. Anyone can give me that question, or maybe get back with me if we don't have that question.
That's been a regular topic of conversation, and we can follow up with you specifically on that particular topic. But needless to say, that's something that we're very keenly aware of, and we're going to continue to work with our partners to address that, particularly when it comes to lines of jurisdiction, not only from a safety and security standpoint between IMPD, Sheriff's Department, and IPSPD, but also thinking through the lens of liability as well.
I'm just concerned with if kids get in fights and things like that happen, or commotion happens. I'm just kind of concerned about that area. The next thing I would have a question on is, it says that we're going to have back-to-school nights at every high school, or we're going to have the back-to-school night. Sorry, the camera's right. You couldn't see you. Is the video training provided for parents? So parents are going to be there on back-to-school night at every high school.
Yes.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moore.
I just have a quick question. You indicated that Purdue Polytech utilized the bus for extracurricular activities, and I recognize that the long-term goal was, as I understood it, was that all high school transportation will be done by Indigo. How do you go about doing the extracurricular activities on the Indigo bus? You know what I'm saying? So if we have no yellow buses going anywhere, how is that? I'm just trying to understand how that works.
Yeah, we operate our service regularly. So we have the model that we're moving to is on weekdays we'll have a 20-hour service day and have frequent service across about 60% of the county. So it's really just a matter of providing the service, and the ID card acts as the way to get on. We're not providing any special trips. We're not doing door-to-door service with our vehicles. We're operating the transit network.
Okay, so that means that like at football games and all that kind of stuff, we still got to use our own some type of transportation to go about doing that. Is that correct? And if we decide that our girls volleyball team is going to someplace, they're going to have to get another. So we will have to have some type of transportation for our high school kids, because we do intend to have extracurricular activities so our kids can be good global customers, right? Okay. The answer was yes, right?
The answer is yes.
That answer is yes.
Commissioner Cool.
And I think that goes back to my question about how long will security be available per day? Because if the children are using that for after-school activities at all, will there still be someone there
Yes.
that they can count on if they need them?
We'll try to
Because
bring.
that's a pretty big place downtown.
It is, yes. As Brian indicated, there is, the security is provided there by armed, by unarmed, security force, private force, as well as IMPD. And then if the students return to our schools, then we will have a responsibility there on campus.
Mama bear.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Very excited. The third item, item 6.03, is the introduction of our school leader framework, as well as an overview of the school goal structure that we've revised for the 1920 year, and that will be presented by Andrew Strope, our Performance and Continuous Improvement Officer, along with Ashley Cowger, our Executive Director of Professional Learning, and Bryn Kardash, the Executive Director of the Transformation Zone.
Good evening, Commissioners and Superintendent Johnson. We are really excited to share with you the school leadership framework for 1920 and all of the components of the framework and how that will drive our supports for school leaders as we roll through the 1920 school year. This has been a culmination of about a year's worth of work, and we have been very intentional to align different support systems for school leaders and become very transparent about what it is to be a school leader in IPS, how we grow our school leaders, and then how we're also recruiting and selecting our leaders. So we're going to share the overall school leadership framework. That's the visual, I believe, that you have in front of you. And then we will also walk you through the 3 systems within the school leadership framework. And myself and Bryn and Andrew will share details about what each of those systems look like. The overview of the framework is to really get intentional about what it is for us to recruit and select principals within IPS, and to help us get more concrete about how we're developing school leaders, and particularly how we're building our talent bench for school leadership within the staffing that we have currently in the district. And it's also helping us be more intentional about what it is to be an effective school leader in the district. We have some driving purposes of this overall framework, and it is to establish the foundation of effectiveness for school leadership in IPS, to create a shared leadership expectation across the district. It also is articulating the support for succession planning in the district. And to inform our recruitment and selection, which I've mentioned, it also is serving as a very concrete coaching and evaluation tool that our school supervisors are using as they're engaging in the day-to-day work and support for our school administrators. The visual that you have in front of you is the culmination and kind of roll-up of the 3 systems, which are the outer ring of that visual. The school plan, which is more that Bryn will share about, but it's the driving idea that if we do strategic planning for our schools and then prioritize coaching and development of our school leaders, which is the rubric, then we will see outcomes of that work within our school goals. Within that outer ring, we have activities and functions that we see a lot from school leadership. There are also activities and functions that we expect ourselves to be investing support and capacity within our school leaders to grow on. And you'll also see that there's an undercurrent of this entire framework, which is our driving focus around racial equity and equity throughout the district. So everything that we do with our school leaders through the course of the 1920 school year is grounded in this framework. We have committed to our school leaders that we stay focused in our supports. And as we have professional development, of which we've had a couple of rounds of professional development with the principals since we shared this with them, we are honoring our commitment to stay focused and to identify what, if we're having a professional development, where does that support the principal in growing against this framework? I should also note for you that this framework is supporting principals and assistant principals. So it's the school leadership framework because we are looking at the collective leadership within a building. I'm going to hand it over to Bryn, who's going to share more about what the school plan is.
Good evening. The school plan was really created because often our schools are required to create multiple plans throughout the year. So to create cohesion around the plans, we've included the school improvement plan, the comprehensive needs assessment, results-driven accountability, and Title I family and community engagement into one plan for schools. This planning tool allows our schools to better execute their strategies and continue to ensure that it is aligned to the vision and the mission of their schools. There are many components of the plan which allow us to address both academics and culture and climate. We started the plan by providing data to the schools. The data has been broken down by all subgroups. The data will also be updated throughout the year as new data is provided to the schools. By breaking it down in subgroups, it allows us to identify any gaps in equity that we can address throughout the year. Also included in the plan is our panorama survey data, that it was broken down by student, staff, and community, family. And so that is more data that is allowing us to address that culture and climate side within our schools. The exciting thing about the plan is it is a living document and will be updated throughout the year. In June, schools came together and had their school teams come for an entire day when we did our principal summit at Arsenal Tech, and they worked through their school plan. They started with their data and really dug in to decide what strategies they were going to address this school year. Between the June and July principal summits, they continued to have work time with support from their EDSs, or being able to bring in community partners, families, teachers. There were lots of engagement ways within the schools. And throughout the year, school supervisors will be meeting at the schools with our learning community support teams. This will happen 4 times throughout the year at a minimum to address the strategies, to check on data that is being progress monitored throughout the year, and to see if we need to make any changes as we're going.
The second part, or the second system within the school leadership framework, is the school leadership rubric. We have, over the last year, implemented a tool that is specifically for recruiting and selecting school leaders within IPS that is a competency-based rubric to ensure that we are selecting the right leaders to lead our schools. And then as we planned forward, starting in February of this year, we started pivoting that recruitment and selection tool into an actual coaching and evaluation tool for all of our school leaders in IPS. And we launched that school leadership rubric with the principals in June and have continued with opportunities to share with them what it looks like, sounds like, feels like to be an effective school leader in IPS. And that work is ongoing with lots of different kinds of support, and I'll articulate some of them. We'll pause for a moment so that you have the opportunity to read the 5 competencies within the school leadership rubric. These competencies were developed and created with lots of stakeholder engagement, both internally with academic leadership team, other departments within Indianapolis Public Schools, and school leaders themselves and school supervisors have all contributed to the input that these are the 5 driving competencies to be an effective school leader in IPS. The first one is that the school leaders are leading from an equity imperative and embrace the diversity of the school community. The second is that our school leaders are establishing a vision that is rooted in equitable practices where all students can achieve at high levels while ensuring an environment of continuous learning for all staff. The third is that we are building an efficient and effective school team. The fourth is that we're mobilizing others and building coalitions to support progress toward the school's vision. And the last is that we are maintaining systems to ensure all students, inclusive of subgroups, have access to a rigorous academic program that supports student learning. These competencies break down into very specific look like, sound like, feel like descriptors within the rubric. And those descriptors are measured against a rating scale. You guys have probably seen something very similar to this with other kinds of rubrics. We start with highly effective. What does highly effective leadership within each of those competencies look like, sound like, feel like? And then the scale moves down to what ineffective looks like, sounds like, feels like within each of those competencies and descriptors. Through the rest of July, we are finalizing the weights and measures of the principal summative evaluation. The rubric is part of that. During the July Principal Summit, which we had earlier this week, we revisited the entire framework with the principals, and we actually rolled up our sleeves and dug into Competency 5 to practice and experience what it looks like, sounds like, feels like to be effective in making sure that we are giving all of our students, inclusive of the subgroups, access to the academic programming that we know they deserve. The Principal Evaluation Working Group, which is representative of school supervisors and our school principals for all grade levels, will continue to meet quarterly to review the implementation of and the strengths of the school leadership rubric. We anticipate that for the 2021 school year that we'll iterate on that rubric as we learn more about what it looks like in implementation. And then we will have ongoing dialogue with our internal stakeholders, academic leadership team, other departments, school supervision, and then professional learning through the 1920 school year to have the same conversations about what's going well, what do we want to improve on, and to position us to make those adjustments for the 2021 school year. I hand it to Andrew for school goals.
Good evening, Commissioners. So you have seen a few of these slides before. When I spoke to you in March, with a performance update, we went over school goals and kind of some updates we were going to push through with the framework. And so this is taking place of what you might have heard before as 6510, which is an internal school goal-facing document or framework that some principals have probably referenced as they've been here talking to you. And so this is a redesign of that. What you see here are the purposes. So what the school goals are trying to do. I'm not going to read all of them, but one of the most important things here is provide a common understanding of school quality and performance so we can start norming some language internally around quality. The values, so as we were designing the school goals, wanted to make sure that we were doing this in a values-based. One of the things that I will call out as we look at the metrics on the next slide is, or a few slides later, is manageable. So there are a tremendous amount of metrics, obviously, that you can utilize in something like this. And we wanted to make sure that it was manageable for school leaders and for their buildings so they weren't trying to look at 70-plus metrics. That's actually what we started with in the list, and then we kind of whittled that down. So you'll see that play through here in the metrics. A little bit of context. So we've been utilizing Timbo, which is a project consultant. They have been designing accountability frameworks across the country for a number of years. So we wanted to make sure that we brought in industry expertise from an organization that has been doing this with a lot of other, both large and small districts as well as state agencies. All recommendations that we are making through this process have been vetted using historical data and modeling. So it's one of the things we've utilized Timbo for. That way we were knowing we were making informed decisions. And this is also an iterative process with framework adjustments occurring over time. So one of the things that we will do as we roll this out in the fall is we'll bring principals back together and school leaders and as well as central office teams to talk about how did it go, what can we do different, what needs to be improved upon. So we want to make sure this is iterative. Another thing I'll mention that's not on the slide, but we've had a principal working group that has been with us every step of the way. We've probably been at this for about 7 months now, if not a little bit longer. I met with them again last week, so everything you're seeing up here they have seen and it has been vetted by a group of our principals. Some additional context, goals will be differentiated based on grade configuration. So we'll have K6, K8, middle school and high school, those will all be separate. Obviously because the middle school and K6 are very different buildings, so we want to make sure that we are fairly representing what is happening in the buildings. And this is really a big improvement, I would say, the next bullet point here, so I really want to reiterate this. Schools should be rewarded for improvement. So the 6-5-10 was an all or nothing approach, which essentially meant you set a goal, if you met it, then you got the points. If you didn't meet it, you didn't get the points. Now you could have grown, right, and just still not met your goal, you wouldn't have gotten any points. And so one of the things that we heard from a lot of internal stakeholders was we want to, in order to drive towards fairness, we should be rewarding improvement. That's what we want to do as a system. And so you'll see that play out when I go over the benchmarking. We want to make sure we're rewarding improvement. So here are the metrics, elementary and middle on the left, high school on the right. Again, you've seen this before. A couple key points I will note. On the left-hand side with elementary and middle school, and this is really where it's different than the old model. We are specifically calling out growth. So I Learn ELA, I Learn Math growth. Again, we get that designation from the state in the fall. And then the bottom row on both sides, the equity bucket. So that is new. And we've had a lot of conversations recently around equity. I know that is definitely going to be a focus moving forward. And so that is something, that bucket there, where we are specifically targeting growth in ELA Math for target students as well as a relative risk ratio, which is a federal designation around SPED disproportionality. So we are being very intentional about calling these things out on a goal framework. And our principals, as well as a lot of the other stakeholders we've engaged with, have been very, very supportive of that bucket. So that is a pretty big change. So the benchmarking, so essentially how are we scoring this? And keeping this at a pretty high level, there are some formulas underneath all of this. But essentially, if you look at the visual there, for each one of those metrics I showed you on the previous slide, there will be a floor and a target set. And that's, you see the visual is kind of a normal distribution or a bell curve. And so what we will do when we get the 18-19 data back, which we don't have yet from the state for iLearn, when we get that, we will calculate what is the 10th percentile, so what is that school that scored at the 10th percentile in whichever metric, and that will be the floor. So essentially, if you're a building and if you're a school and you get points above that floor, then you'll get credit for that, you'll get points. And then the target will set at the 90th percentile, so if your school at the 90th or above, then you will get full points. So if you end next school year anywhere in between that floor and target, you're going to get some points. You're going to get credit for that. And so again, that is rewarding improvement, and this has been a big shift from the old model, which was just either you hit your goal or you didn't. And so this is aligned with best practice and a lot of what you're seeing state agencies as well as larger districts start rolling out. So some next steps. I'm not going to read all of these, but one of the things we will start doing is develop metric business rules. So that's really important to call out. That's very much in the weeds. What are the numerator and denominators of those metrics I showed you? So which students are we talking about? We will determine the weights for each metric. So how does all that roll up into the overall rating? And then we will revalidate these goals when we get the 18-19 data. So this really is a draft until we get the data back from the state, and we will run all of the modeling again, ensure there aren't any big swings or anything like that, and make decisions then. But we feel pretty good about where we're at now. A lot of input in this, and again, some pretty big shifts from where we've been in the past. So that's it. We'll go ahead and take questions.
Commissioner Arnold?
Back on slide 8, you talk about recruiting, how to recruit and select the best building leaders or school leaders. How does the work that you're doing here segue over to what happens in human resources when that work actually takes place, where apparently people are interviewed or whatever? I guess I understand what you're doing, but I don't understand how in practice does what you're doing here transition into
Yep.
individuals that are interviewed or recruited or hired at the school level, if that makes any sense at all.
So the look back was that we created an actual rubric for recruiting and selecting school leaders. So what does it take to be a school leader in IPS before they're even here? We're identifying that as the pool of applicants become available for a school principalship, they are going through kind of a standardized process against that rubric to say, do they have the mindset, beliefs, values, skills to lead in IPS? That's been a tool that we've been exercising through the 18-19 school year and will continue to use. That tool articulated a lot of the behaviors and competencies that we wanted to see in all of our school leaders. So when we saw what we were able to identify as really great qualities for school leadership from the evidence of that selection tool, we pulled those positive evidence points out and then said, well, what if we take those positive evidence points, how do we grow people against that? So if you're already employed as a school leader in IPS, how do we make you excellent and not just great? So things like making sure that as a building leader, I am disaggregating all of my data in my building by subgroups. So I can see every element of what's happening for my students, whether they have classification as being an English language learner or special education, by race, by ethnicity. We've never formally articulated that that's an expectation of school leaders in IPS, and also that they're using that data to make strategic decisions about how they're growing staff. Within the rubric that we pivoted from the selection tool to now everybody in IPS is growing against this, we were able to get really concrete about what that looks like. So it's not just, do you have the right mindset? It's that we're seeing behaviors and actions in your building that suggest you are inclusive of all people. And an evidence point of that would be the disaggregation example. So that's the interconnection between what we've had, what we've been using for bringing new people on board, and then what we were able to build for all of the people who are currently with us to continue to grow them.
I get it, but I still, I mean, does the Human Resources Department work using what you all have created?
No, sorry, can I jump in for a second? Ashley actually sits with the Human Resources team.
Okay, that's
so
where
I think
was
it's almost the flip of what happened. We had built out this great selection recruitment tool that had the competencies already in HR that HR was using, and the goal was let's push that now so that in our coaching of our current staff, we use a tool that we've now built out for everybody.
I guess because it's always kind of nebulous of how to, you know, when do you include community in selecting building leaders and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I like the work and I think it's great. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't done in a vacuum and then it wasn't transitioning over to the actual selection of and recruitment of building leaders. So that helps. Thank you very much.
And it may also be helpful to know, I support in both academics and human resources. So professional learning lives in both worlds. So we're having the conversation back and forth.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Collins.
Yes, thank you for all your work. And I have a few questions. And I'll just start with the last one. And how is improvement rewarded for the schools, or for leadership, or for improvement? How is improvement rewarded?
In terms of the rubric or the goals?
What does it mean to be rewarded for your improvement?
So with the rubric, that is the tool that we are using to coach and evaluate school leaders. So if you're performing well as a school leader against that rubric, that means that when we're looking at compensation, that is pay increase over time for performing against our expectations and doing well. In terms of goals, you want to speak to that one? Okay.
In the school goals, I'll go back to this here. So it's all part of the same system. So the school goals will calculate, and that will be funneled into the overall evaluation system. And then we'll speak to what Ashley just described. If you're doing better on your goals, then your overall evaluation should increase, which would then lead to, potential increase.
Will that
increase
potential
over time.
increase also be rewarding teachers for the work, or for those who have actually done a lot of the implementation of the some of the activities that were described in the rubric?
So the goals that Andrew was speaking about is a part of teacher evaluation within their overall performance. I call it the performance pie regularly. So teachers have had 6, 5, 10. You guys have heard a lot about that, I think, in the past, as a measure of their evaluation. School goals replace that. So because we're rewarding growth within the school goals measure, that does positively impact teachers as well.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Thank you. The other question I had was, is there a mechanism to share? You mentioned the word stakeholders through this, through the presentation. And so I'm assuming that parents are also stakeholders. And if not, I would recommend that the public also be, they are able to access some of the positive results of some of the goals that have been set in the school.
Yeah, so one of the parts of the school plan is also to have a state of the schools. And so each school is required to provide data and information to stakeholders throughout the year. So we call it our state of the school. It will update on all of the goals that are within their school plan. It will update on progress, where they are throughout the year, and it will highlight celebrations of things that have happened in the building. So those will be shared at regular meetings.
That's wonderful. That's very encouraging. And my third question was, when you're talking about analyzing data, I mean, there's a lot of levels on that, a lot of depth. Do we have a nimble system to analyze data and to actually use it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, yes, and Brenda and I were smiling at each other because she did a lot of great work in building. The SIP plan is built in Google, actually, and so it is incredibly nimble. So her and I have worked very closely together, and my team has been putting a lot of data in that for principals. So it is, it is available for all of the principals and their teams to use. They've been using it for the past couple months at their principal summits. And so it is nimble. That is obviously something we're continuously working on, but we've taken a giant leap forward this summer.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Commissioner Slack?
Yes. All right. First question I have was, I know that you said pay increases is that for teachers or is that for schools? Are schools getting the more pay because they're exceeding the improvement rate from the floor up, or were you referring to teachers are getting that improvement rewards?
They're getting the improvement rewards based on the school goals measure within their evaluation pie. The compensation that I was referring to is specifically for the school leadership against the school leadership framework here and their ability to demonstrate their effectiveness, highly effectiveness, and so on.
Okay, thank you. And how does this help our low-performing schools? Already having issues. How is this program going to help them?
Sure.
You're next.
I work with transformation zone schools, which have typically been our lowest performing schools. And so what it does is it allows us to really focus on growth. We have focused on growth a great deal when we've met with the state or when we've set our goals for our school improvement grant. And so this allows an opportunity for those schools to be rewarded for that growth. So typically growth had not been in our 6, 5, 10 goals. And now with growth being in there as a measure, it really allows those schools to have an opportunity to receive points when in past years they might not have.
I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate that. I'm also appreciative of the purpose. I talked to Superintendent Johnson about having support for succession planning and leadership pipeline. I think that's very important for all of our schools that already have that in place. Next question I have for you would be, oh, actually, you answered it, so no problem. Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Thank you to the three of you. And I think we all love to know the state of the schools when those happen and occur, because I would love to visit and just witness that discussion with principals, families, principals, teachers, community in general. So that's excellent that we're doing that. So this is probably more of a shameless plug from a business operations perspective, and it doesn't look like there's much more room in here, but you did say, Andrew, that it was iterative. And so, knowing that we're moving into a world where our school leaders have more engagement and their management and planning and allocation of dollars and resources, I would encourage in the iterative process that we seek ways to push in sort of how leaders are appropriating, utilizing those funds and resources as we move in that world, in that way. So just wanted to lift that up as something as a shameless plug from an operations.
We did have limited space on the visual
I can
framework.
tell. I mean, it's blank on the second page of it. Yeah,
I say
understand.
that tongue in cheek,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah, yeah.
But to your point, though, that is actually spelled out explicitly in the school leadership rubric, where we are saying, like, you are being very thoughtful and strategic about the use of resources that you have within your building, both the resources in supporting people, having people in front of your students, and then also your use of resources in professional development and other things. So operations, the kind of back logic and how we were working toward building this rubric was, how do you articulate what it looks like to be a CEO, CFO, COO, CIO, CTO as a school leader? And in working with all of our stakeholders, it was also working with folks who live in ops and finance in the district. We felt very confident with where we landed on that within the rubric.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Gore?
Thank you very much, all three of you. I know this is hard work, and we do appreciate it. But looking at equity, I'm very pleased to see that as something that you've added. For the metric there, for the growth, do you have something that you could share with us that you're going to be able to evaluate?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, looking at slide 16, so we kept this pretty high level where it says ELA growth for target students, for example. So is your question around, like, what does that mean, the target students? Yeah, it's a great question. So we're still having conversations about that, but I can tell you where they're leading. So we want to align as much as possible to the state on stuff like this for clarity. And so the state actually has, they call it TSI indicators, where they will essentially select subgroups where, you know, schools may not be doing as well on. So a subgroup might be, for example, you know, African American students. And principals then have to set goals around those specific subgroups. And so that target student, since it's already been selected by the state, would be exactly what's in this framework.
And same with graduation rates?
Correct.
How we're going to do it. So we will be comparing then school year 1920 and on from now.
Yes. Yep.
I think building off Commissioner Gore's question on the equity component, albeit fresh from 6.5 hours on Saturday talking about equity, but it just sort of my perspective of having worked with metrics and performance goals is, you know, we've said very plainly we want to close the achievement gap between our minority students and non-minority students, and I just wonder if we ought to be more specific in our document to say, you know, in our equity, that I know you say it, right, growth for targeted students, but whether we ought to be more explicit than that, and just, you know, say explicitly we're one of our targets, we can choose to lead the state on this. This is really one of our targeted efforts we're looking to school leaders to help us reach. That's a thought.
Editorial comment.
Thank you, yes. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it'll be the first time the state, I believe, under ESSA is doing this sort of targeted student designation. So I think we'll do some real learning on like, who are those groups? Are we seeing it's the same groups, you know, across grade levels, et cetera, as we implement this year. So yeah, iterative, you know, is one of my favorite words. So we'll continue to learn.
My second question is relative to slide 18. Just your point of you'll revalidate the data with 18-19 data. So did you build this with 17-18 data primarily? Is that the?
Yeah, we actually went 3 years back. So
Okay.
we did 3 years of data, including 17 and 18. Yeah, and obviously so for some of the metrics that are included in-house around our student information system, we just rolled that over about 2 weeks ago. And so we're doing that validation now. And then once we receive the iLearn metrics from the state, then we'll do that for 18-19. Yeah, you're welcome.
Any further questions? Great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, team. They've been working tremendously hard. So it's very exciting. The last superintendent report is an overview of recent updates to our student code of conduct. Brent Freeman will be back along with Courtney Flukas, our executive director of Unified Systems. While this presentation does not require board action, we did want to bring the updates to you all because the code of conduct serves as the corresponding administrative guidelines for our student discipline, the board student discipline policy. So want to make sure that you are aware of the updates that have been made for the 1920 school year. I'll turn it over to Brent and Courtney.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Johnson and Commissioners. Long time no see. Good to be back up with you again, this time about Code of Conduct updates. And those of you that have been on the board for a number of years recall Dr. Cynthia Jackson coming and presenting about this in the past. And so this is just an annual update of work that has been ongoing. So we'll refresh on the purpose of the Code of Conduct, share some of the guiding goals. We'll share a few reflections of the annual review process and what some of the key updates that have been made to the Student Code of Conduct are, and then how we're enhancing equitable application along the theme of racial equity, and the Student Code of Conduct is a key component of that in our schools. And so what is the purpose of the Student Code of Conduct? Well, it is a guidance document for students and families, as well as an expectation document for staff. Research does show that ambiguity is the friend of disproportionality. And so we want to clear up ambiguity to the extent possible in a student behavior code. And so we also want to be proactive, promoting the prevention and positive climate. You all have seen panorama data that includes some school culture and climate, and you know there's opportunities for growth and improvement there. And so this reinforces some of the strategy there. And then corrective actions and universal procedures. And universal procedures are things such as teacher classroom management and what gets handled in the classroom versus what would get referred out to the school administrator. There are some guiding goals in the development of the Student Code of Conduct. These are unchanged, but they're reinforced and adjusted each year. And so to support the core of our work, equitable practices for all, teaching and learning is what we're all about, and so that is reinforced in the Code of Conduct. Increasing the consistency of tiered supports, and sometimes this means PBIS or MTSS, both tiered systems, and schools have flexibility from site to site and what that looks like. So increasing consistency. Also the system of graduated corrective responses, which is from a teacher redirection all the way to the extreme of an expulsion. So there's clarity in the system there. And then reducing exclusionary practices, which we do know from the research tells us is critical for student growth. And so now I'll hand it over to Courtney Henderson to talk a little bit more about the updates from this year. I'm sorry. I said Courtney Henderson. Courtney Flukas. Forgive me.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Good evening. In the spring and summer, the USS Department initiated the annual review of the Code of Conduct and its application via Principal Working Group. Principals were able to calibrate on discipline responses, interpretations of Code of Conduct language, and identification of common and unique tiered supports. Those supports that would diminish the need for harsh consequences is what we wanted to focus on mostly. Principals and key stakeholders agree that consistent application of the Code of Conduct will yield more equitable responses to misbehavior. The recommendations derived from this group, in addition to the culture and climate panorama data and implications from the new school leader framework, have elicited a few key updates to be applied in the 1920 version. To reinforce consistent application, the code now utilizes the term expectation rather than guide to direct administrative response. The IPS attendance policy, roles and responsibilities of school police, as well as minor grammatical edits have been added for clarification and consistency. Ultimately, we believe that the quality of a school's social environment has a profound impact on student outcomes such as academic performance, attendance, behavior, and graduation rates. As a result of this fact and our effort to ensure equitable and consistent response to behavior, we have mandated new training opportunities for all administrators and staff, have developed a systematic process for data analysis and review, and will regularly engage with building leaders in strategic thought partnership to ensure staff and student needs are addressed in a timely manner. I thank you for your time and welcome any questions.
Commissioner Gore?
I don't have any questions. Basically, how are we making sure that parents are aware of this code? Are our PIs giving them books? Are they having training overnight?
We once we formalize all the edits, we do translate this to Spanish, and we update We're in the process right now of updating with our communications office a very slick, abbreviated version that gets sent home and can be distributed in schools. And so we refresh that process when we make any edits.
And they know how to go to our My
There you go.
IPS
And it gets posted online. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Collins?
I apologize if this is too far out in the weeds or some not related to you guys, but I recall reading on some legislative, current legislative wording, language about attendance, and that lessons or consistent with the progress of the class have to be provided to students who are separated from the school for discipline reasons, including detention, going to juvenile detention, that sort of thing. Is that understood by the, do you know if that's even something that's teachers are made aware of? And in the legislative wording that I saw, it said that teachers must provide, or that the work must be provided to the student if the parent requests, and then it must be brought back, but it has no language that it has to be graded or counted. And so do we have any kind of general policy on that, or is that up to the teacher, or how do we address that?
Good question. We certainly do have an attendance policy. I'm not sure it gets at that. In fact, I know it doesn't get at that level of specificity for follow-up. I can speak to in special education when a student misses time for disciplinary incidents. We have 10 days of exclusion that is allowed under law, and then after that, services are provided, whether it's at home or in a different facility. In Center Township with the juvenile system, there's actually a charter school that operates the school at the juvenile detention center, and so they actually unenroll from IPS and are enrolled in Marion Academy.
It's a transfer.
Yes, and so there are services provided both in the juvenile detention center, and if they want to, they can stay enrolled in Marion Academy outside of the juvenile detention center. And then we do have a school at the Marion County Jail. IPS does run with 3 staff a school at the Marion County Jail.
Okay, and so that their grades would continue if they're a student is in a school in either the juvenile detention center or in the jail, then they would follow a consistent credit courses as all the rest of the students at their age or their grade level, and that would be counted?
It's a good question. So if they're midstream in a semester, it's very difficult for any transition like that to occur. If potentially if it was online learning, that could follow with, but their transcript goes with, and so any credits that they've earned, and completed, that would be transportable to a new school. And then in the Marion Academy example, which again non-IPS, but a charter program, they can stay enrolled there after not being at the juvenile detention center.
I've had teachers ask me about this whole thing with the attendance, that do they have to count their work, or because of the language of the state language. So it's a question that I would like to have a follow-up on.
We can certainly do that. Yeah.
Mr. Arnold?
It's a very important document. How do we ensure that it is implemented with fidelity at the school level?
Yeah.
Because I hear stories of, this principal just gets rid of any bad kids, and this one lets kids do whatever they want to do and never kicks kids. So how do we, who does that, and how is it done?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So that's part of what one of the changes that we're looking at here in terms of enhancing equitable application is the data monitoring. And so taking the opportunity to step back on a monthly basis and review the data that's put into PowerSchool around discipline, and is that consistent with the code of conduct? And so if an incident is, for instance, level 3 or 4, that actually necessitates or can justify a suspension, a removal from school. But was the incident really a level 3, or was it improperly sort of assessed to be a suspendable offense. And so we're working with the team of school supervisors, the executive directors of schools, and they'll have monitoring cycles within their schools. And so that is one thing that we're looking to do more of in this next iteration of the Code of Conduct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Slack?
I guess I have one in regards to Commissioner Arnold's statement. So what I hear you saying is that you're going to constantly be training building leaders around this culture and climate issue that we're having.
That's correct. Okay. Yeah, and that got to start. Our first opportunity this year was this week to present on a lot of these changes to the entire group and talk about implementation and offer some tools and resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item or the agenda will be returned back to me. We are on unfinished business. I'll remind everybody, we began the superintendent selection process in January with multiple listening sessions throughout the district. We held open public interviews with the 3 finalists in this room. We then later announced an agreement in principle, with Alicia Johnson, and we posted the economic components of that agreement in principle on July 3rd. We held a public hearing on the employment agreement in this room on July 16th at 3 p.m. And now we're here today. As I said, in unfinished business. Item 7.01 includes the proposed employment agreement with Alicia Johnson as the IPS superintendent, which is now resolution number 5271, approving the agreement with Ms. Johnson as our superintendent. The contract is presented in your materials and outlines the terms and benefits of the employment agreement. Are there any questions or comments about the employment agreement? Commissioner Arnold.
Yes, I would just like to say that I'm proud to join with my fellow commissioners to approve the selection of Alicia Johnson as the first African-American female to lead Indianapolis Public Schools. There are many reasons why I believe she's an excellent choice to lead our district. I would like to highlight just a few of those reasons that are important to me. I'm deeply impressed with her passion to embrace racial equity for all of our students. Her vocal and complete support of this important initiative will enhance the work of Pat Payne and the Racial Equity Institute to ensure that the achievement gap for all of our children of color is eliminated. I also appreciate that Alicia does not make excuses or blame others for issues in the district. She's willing to address difficult issues, listen to those involved, and put necessary actions in place to make things better. She will not accept the status quo, and even when change is painful, I believe she will push forward to ensure that the best educational opportunities are provided for all of our students. Finally, I believe she has excellent interpersonal skills that will allow her to create new partnerships, increase parental engagement, and foster positive community dialogue. She's willing to not only be visible, but to be fully engaged in every aspect of district relationships. Her effort to improve communication with the creation of the FACE initiative has demonstrated her commitment to improve information sharing and transparency. I'm excited to spend at least the next 1.5 years working with Superintendent Johnson as we address the difficult issues related to urban education, but to also celebrate the improved educational outcomes that will ensure that every child in every neighborhood has access to the highest quality education possible.
Any other comments? Commissioner Hawkins.
I'm not even going to try to second or follow that. That was incredible. But I do want to just state that this is the most important decision that a school board commissioner makes. I believe this is the most important position in the city of Indianapolis. And so I just want to thank the community for being engaged in part of this process, this very important selection process. Also want to just acknowledge and give a shout out to the IUPUI School of Ed and the ISBA for their collaboration, Denise Hurd and some of the other people, Zach, the board in general. But in general, also want to thank the candidates that applied, specifically Dr. Young, Dr. Horton. But I also will be voting in favor of and proud to vote in support of the contract for Superintendent Alicia Johnson, and I have an incredible amount of respect for her character, capability, her experience. One that I'm most proud of is and encouraged by is the humility and the commitment to excellence and racial equity specifically. So I'm so proud of this moment and to be a part of this moment.
Any other comments?
I didn't come
Commissioner Moore?
See, they tricked me. I didn't come prepared for a statement, so I guess I'll say I'll let my vote speak for me, and I'll be very proud to vote you as our new superintendent.
I will only add, as I am equally proud, I'm equally appreciative of all the board members who spent a lot of time in those multiple listening sessions. And I'm proud to take place in a history-making decision tonight. But I also think we should recognize one of the things I've learned from being on this board is how important having equitable systems in place. And in this case, we aren't just hiring, in my opinion, the first African-American female to lead the school system. We're hiring the best candidate who presented themselves to us. And I'm very proud that both of those happen to be true. And so with that, unless there are further comments, Commissioner Slack?
I too would like to welcome Superintendent Johnson. I hope that we can work together to make sure that IPS is a place where we can be proud to be a parent, a student, a teacher, or a staff member. I want to also thank the other candidates that took the time to be and wish them in their endeavors in the future. I also want to say, even though we're not unanimous in our decisions all the time as a board, I still support IPS strongly and encourage us all to work together. Thank you.
Commissioner Gore?
I'd just like to take this opportunity to wish you well and know that it's going to be great working with her. I love the words she used. One of them is called equity. And I do know that she is very serious about that, and I do appreciate that. And so for our next year and a half, we look forward to working with you as well.
I think it's at least year and a half, Commissioner Gore.
I said at least year and a half, that's it.
Any other further comments?
Last but
Yeah,
not least.
Commissioner Fowler?
Well, with all the good words having been said already, I really am very proud of how we work together and how this whole district has a clear focus on making it the best district in the state, and in providing the best education possible for the widest, most diverse population of students in the entire state. And I'm very privileged and lucky to be here. And I'm so happy for you.
Glad you're here too.
On a side note.
That being said, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 5271 approving the employment agreement as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. I'll now switch to the agenda. Yes? Oh. I have a ceremonial act.
Uh-oh.
This is really this and would you like fries with that are my two skill sets. It doesn't fit exactly, so I have to slide it in.
Changing of the signs.
Now it's officially
All right, back to new business. Thank you. Item 8.01 is a resolution regarding the special education excess designation. As we talked about on Tuesday, applications for SEECs for students who require out-of-district placements due to extraordinary special education needs must be submitted to and approved by the IDOE and must be signed by the President of the Board of School Commissioners. The IDOE allows these contracts to be signed and executed by a board-authorized designee, and so the administration requests the board's approval of the posted resolution, which would appoint Weston Young as our designee.
Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 7830, making the appointment as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you. Item 8.02, and I'll ask Mindy to come up, is an update on compensation as well as a transition to a master salary schedule. Mindy presented on Tuesday. On this item, there were a couple of questions from commissioners, and so she will clarify regarding mostly how to translate these classifications into some of the existing roles and titles we have in the district now.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. I'm just here back, and basically what we did was we inserted an extra slide into the presentation. I'll just remind you, this is not an exhaustive list, but I went through positions and tried to match them up where we would anticipate the pay levels to be. Based on some of the deep dives in the department, it may shift a little bit. We haven't gone through those deep dives, but I hope that this gives you a little bit more of a better idea of how we sort of match up levels to some of the roles. I would also remind you that where we're moving towards is a less sort of title-based way of doing things, and that's definitely where we've come from. If you're a coordinator, you were only this, versus if you're a coordinator with special certification or in the IT world is very different from a coordinator in benefits or payroll. I hope that's helpful.
Any further questions of Mindy? Commissioner Arnold?
Just a comment from the one who requested that. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
It really was helpful for me because I had no idea, and I was surprised at some of the categories of some of the people where they fell out. So thank you for taking your time
Absolutely.
to provide that.
Any further questions? That being said, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 5272, approving the compensation adjustments and transition to a master salary schedule as presented? Been moved.
Second.
And seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you. Item 8.03 was presented also on Tuesday. It's an update to our facilities rental policy that was presented by Scott Martin. And so the administration requests the board's approval of the updates, understanding that it is the 30-day, needs to sit for 30
Items
days.
8.03 and 8.04 will sit for 30 days, and we'll take action on them at the August board meeting.
Oh, okay. So we'll request that approval next month. On item 8.04, similarly, was the update to our use of tobacco policy. And so after sitting for the 30 days, then we'll ask for the board's approval next month as well. And that concludes new business.
Does any commissioner have closing comment? Hearing none, I'll turn it over to the new superintendent of the Indianapolis Public Schools.
Thank you, President O'Connor. A few things I want to share. Tonight's board meeting is our last before we welcome our students back to school for the 1920 school year. Next week, the first of our schools will be in session with Edison School of the Arts and Thomas Gregg Neighborhood School, both kicking off on Monday, July 29th. Additional schools will also open next week. Cold Spring, Avondale Meadows Middle School, Phelan Leadership Academies at 93 and 103 will also all start over the course of the next week. So we're very excited to welcome all of our kiddos back. The rest of our IPS family of schools will head back on Monday, August 5th. So to our families and community, please be on the lookout for the back to school activities and events that are happening across our district. We also have a district-wide back to school bash on Saturday, August 3rd at the Indiana Historical Society. Backpacks, giveaways, I think haircuts and hairstyles. So we invite all of our families to come out and be a part of that day on Saturday, August 3rd. We also did not do any special recognitions earlier this evening, but I do have one. Tonight is the last board meeting for Joe Grammel-Spocker. There he is all the way in the back.
Joe, come up front.
Joe serves as the Director of Special Projects in the Office of the Superintendent. He has served as an IPS employee since 2012, first as a high school teacher at Crispus Attucks High School teaching math, and then in the superintendent's office, filling all kinds of roles, both official and unofficial. If you work with Joe at all, we are very excited and proud of him. He is heading off to Yale University to pursue his MBA and his law degree. And we will certainly hold him to coming back to Indiana when he finishes his work in graduate school to continue the work that we're doing here, but we wish him all the best and thank him so much for all he's given to our district. So if you can join me in thanking Joe. As for me, I want to take the opportunity to once again thank the IPS Board of School Commissioners for your confidence in me to lead our district. I am incredibly humbled by the opportunity to serve alongside you. I agree with the ways in which we've already been able to work well together, and so I'm excited for our continued work. I am compelled by what I know we can do together for our students, our team, our families, our teachers, our students. The larger Indianapolis community is counting on us to make the very best decisions that we can in service of our vision of being a family of excellent public schools, in which every student has the opportunity to succeed and the power to create their own future. So I'm excited to get to be a part of that. I'm excited to be hopefully a role model for young black girls, white girls, black boys, black girls, everybody, as our community, as we talk about racial equity and really work to create a great experience for our kids, and honored, hopefully, to do our ancestors proud. I also want to recognize my parents who are here this evening. Tawana, career-long educator. My dad, Steve, who's an engineer but supports the education work. My husband, Andre, and one of my 3 children, my son, Frederick. So very happy to have them here.
I have 2 items before I adjourn. One is, it looks like your son might have a gift that maybe he should present to you during the meeting, if that's okay. And then this past weekend, I read an article about your family that I believe was in the Evansville paper. So welcome to your parents, and we're proud of you, and I'm sure you're proud of the new superintendent. Our next regular meeting will be our work session on Tuesday, August 20th at 6 p.m. We don't have a location yet, but we will advertise that as soon as we do. And having completed all items on the agenda, the meeting stands adjourned.